Mr. O'Neill, what is the reason that Sandymount Elementary was chosen? I feel like we keep hearing, I think Freedom has come up a lot, that they have some more capital issues. Sandymount is relatively new,
We looked at
newish.
Freedom as one of the options, either in lieu of Sandymount or in lieu of Mount Airy Elementary. It goes back, I guess it's sort of the same conversation as East Middle. It goes back to, we arrived at a utilization figure that we thought would be appropriate now and for the next 10 years. And at the elementary level, we started with Charles Carroll. So that was, to us, a given. That was a school that had not been, or a school that was identified in your educational facilities master plan to begin the process of looking at closing Charles Carroll. So that was our starting point. From there, we probably turned our attention first to William Winchester, because that's the highest elementary school modernization. For me, I would say not as critical as Charles Carroll, or not as critical as East Middle, but it would be your highest elementary modernization project. We felt like we learned pretty quickly in trying to break down William Winchester that closing two elementary schools that are contiguous, is that the right word, Mike? Mike taught me a word. I used to say adjacent. Is challenging because of the impact on literally moving transportation and otherwise moving those kids from the closed schools into the remaining schools around them. When you add the fact that William Winchester is a larger elementary school, it's a full elementary school, it's geographically in the center of our county, then it becomes even more challenging. So we eventually abandoned William Winchester and then shifted our priority from age and condition to anything else. And once it became anything else, it really became a matter of trying to figure out, we're working from the premise that we're going to balance enrollment across the school system. So we're not just going to close a school and then move the kids as little as possible. We looked at Hampstead Elementary for a while. That's an underutilized school. If we closed Hampstead using today or 2014 enrollments, there'd be other factors, but for one example, Spring Garden would be at about 130% capacity like that. And so we said, okay, unless we're going to, by virtue of closing, overutilize surrounding schools, then we need to look at this more systemically across the whole system and try to find something that's going to make sense now and for a long time. So then we started trying to figure out, where can you go geographically where there is room in the surrounding schools to move the kids, where you can impact the feeder patterns in those areas less than you might in other ways. And we ultimately arrived at Sandymount. So it wasn't an easy decision. I think it probably surprised some of us on the committee that would be a place where we ended up. But Sandymount Elementary is a school you could close. It has some capital offsets attached to it over time. It's a school you can close. You can relocate the kids to the surrounding schools at the elementary level, but also fit them into the middle and high school progression. And so we chose Sandymount for those and a variety of other reasons. We still felt like at the elementary level there was utilization available, or utilization to be addressed beyond those two schools, Charles Carroll and Sandymount. And we went through a similar process across the county. So we looked at a lot of things. I know people have raised Freedom. We spent a lot of time looking at Freedom. Probably talked about some other schools near Freedom, and ultimately discounted it. If we were comfortable with Sandymount, then to us it didn't make sense to close Freedom. That's a very dense part of the county, population-wise, and also you have to kind of reboot way back in time to a point in time following the MGT report, where we were charged with addressing overutilization today at Piney Ridge Elementary. And so if you're pushing some Sandymount kids this way and you're pushing kids in the other areas in the different direction, we felt like we needed Freedom in place to do that. And this is rambling because I'm
But why
sort of-
not look at Mount Airy? I guess the concern I have with Mount Airy and Sandymount is they are both gateways from people who work in other communities choose to come to Mount Airy and to Sandymount because they work in Baltimore or they work in DC or Baltimore. And so it's sort of the stopping ground for somebody who wants to come to Carroll County, but they know they can't get too much further in. And so the concern I have with closing those two schools is I feel like you're literally closing the door on the county. I mean, you're saying if you want to come to Carroll County, then you got to come further in. And I think that that's going to be a deterrent for a lot of people to come to the county. I go back to the MGT study where we looked at Piney, and one of the recommendations they made, as you said, is to address that issue. So why not, instead of close these schools here and work our way this way, why not work our way that way from Piney out?
I don't know that we didn't do that. It's not that we didn't look at lots of different things. The gateway to the county concept, it's not something I considered. I mean, when I look at our migration statistics, this is not a county where people are moving to. And we're hearing from people in Ebb Valley and Charles Carroll saying they commute to Baltimore.
I think there are a lot of people who have come into Mount Airy who come from other counties. I still believe that. I can't speak to Sandymount specifically, whether people from Baltimore County are choosing to come to Sandymount. Somebody else might be able to address that. I just feel like it creates one more unwelcome sign to our county.
Are there enrollment, I understand your point, we don't see it in the enrollment projections. We don't see that
Right.
those are the schools that are growing.
You have 933 kids in Mount Airy schools.
But Parsbridge is dropping in enrollment.
I guess the
Yeah.
projections are only as good as the guess. I mean, we started at the beginning of the meeting talking about, well, it's kind of a guess. It's kind of a guess.
Well, we've been fairly accurate. I guess that's the only counter I would say is the enrollment projections are fairly accurate. I understand the concept of this as an entry point. I do understand that. It's just that we're not seeing it in the enrollment projections.
And let me draw back to at least under board policy and under redistricting and under our regulations, and basically what I think we charged, even though we weren't as clear as we probably should have been about the feeder system, we asked you to look at our existing policy and regulations of considering those factors. And I think what you've explained is your committee has looked at those.
Tried to.
And that we in fact then may differ in regards to which school or not school, but how you got to that point.